way. It's him teaching you to lean on what he already said. He don't always repeat himself because his last word was strong enough to hold you. And if you only live off fresh noise, you'll forget the foundation he already laid. Think about school. The teacher don't keep explaining while you taking the test. They already gave the notes. They already prepared the lessons. Now it's your turn to apply. And while you sweating over the paper, feeling like you on your own, the teacher's still in the room, watching, observing, present, just quiet. And that's how God rolls in the night watch. He ain't ghosting, he grading. He ain't absent, he assessing. And here's what silence proves. Faith that only stands when God is talking ain't real faith. Real faith holds on when heaven feels mute. Real faith says, even when I don't hear him, I trust he hears me. Real faith don't collapse in the gap between prayers and answers. It matures there. Silence is the gym where faith lifts heavier weight. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. But it builds muscle you ain't know you had. So flip the script. When God don't say nothing, it's not neglect. It's nurture. He's teaching you patience. He's stretching your trust. He's quiet in the noise so you can finally hear your own faith echo back. You ain't being ignored. You being instructed. And when you pass this test, when you come out this silent season, you gonna realize he was speaking all along, just in a language only stillness could teach. Sometimes God's silence ain't distance, it's invitation. He quiet not cause he far, but cause he near, closer than your breath. And the stillness is his way of pulling you in. See, when the noise of life fades, when heaven ain't handing you play-by-play instructions, you got two choices, panic or press in. And pressing in is how intimacy grows. Think about relationships. When two people first meet, they talk nonstop, texting, calling, every detail shared. But when they grow close, when they really know each other, they can sit in silence without fear. The quiet ain't awkward, it's comfort. Presence itself becomes the conversation. And that's what God wants for you. Not just a faith that survives on constant updates, but a faith that trusts his presence even when his voice ain't loud. And here's the secret. Silence sharpens your hearing. When the room is noisy, whispers get drowned out. But in stillness, you start hearing things you would have missed otherwise. God's whispers ride on quiet. His nudges, his peace, his gentle pull, they don't compete with chaos. They require space. And if he stay quiet, maybe it's 'cause he wants you leaning in close enough to catch the whisper. The silence of God don't push you away. It pulls you deeper. It trains you to seek, not just receive. It shifts prayer from a shopping list to a relationship. Instead of, God, gimme, 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 it becomes, God, just be here. And in that shift, you realize the silence wasn't empty. It was full of presence you never slowed down enough to notice. So next time you sit in the quiet, don't assume abandonment. Assume invitation. He's saying, draw near to me and I'll draw near to you. Silence is the open door to step closer than you ever been before. And that closeness, that's where real peace starts living. Silence is soil, fam. And soil seasons don't look impressive. You don't plant a seed and hear applause. You don't bury it and immediately see results. Nah, you cover it in dirt, walk away, and trust the process. And for weeks, sometimes months, it looks like nothing happening. But under the surface, life is working. Roots forming, foundations strengthening. Growth in places eyes can't see. That's what God's silence is like. You feel buried, but you're actually planted. You feel hidden, but you're actually protected. And while you sitting there thinking God forgot, he actually setting you up for fruit you ain't ready to carry yet. Just because nothing sprouted don't mean nothing's happening. Some of God's best work happens in the dark. Think about Joseph in prison. His dream looked dead, buried under years of silence. But underground, God was shaping character, building resilience, teaching him to lead. By the time Pharaoh called, Joseph wasn't just a dreamer anymore. He was a governor ready to steward nations. And all that preparation happened in the soil of silence. Same with you. The promise ain't dead, it's just underground. And silence is the greenhouse. Faith grows in quiet places. Patience develops in unseen seasons. Strength takes root when nobody clapping, nobody watching, nobody affirming. And if you can stay planted in the silence, you gon' see fruit that lasts. So don't curse the dirt. Don't despise the quiet. Dirt is dark, yes, but dirt is necessary. Silence feels suffocating, yes, but silence is sacred. It's the space where God buries what he intends to resurrect. And when the sprout breaks through, when the fruit finally shows, you're going to look back and thank him for every silent season, because that's where your roots learned how to hold. Here's what you got to catch, fam. Silence don't weaken you. It strengthens you. It don't strip your faith. It stretches it. And what feels like heaven holding out is actually heaven building you up. God ain't quiet 'cause he careless. He quiet 'cause he careful. Careful enough to shape you in ways a quick answer never could. See, easy answers create shallow roots. But silence drives you deeper. It forces you to dig past feelings, dig past impatience, dig past surface level trust. Silence carves out a well in your spirit that shallow blessings could never fill. And once that well is dug, God can pour into it without fear it'll spill over too fast. Silence is strategy. He's making sure the vessel matches the vision. Think about Jesus at 12 years old. He knew who he was. He was already about his father's business. But after that moment, the Bible goes quiet on him for nearly 2 decades. Silence, no miracles, no sermons, just hidden years. But were those years wasted? Nah, they were preparation. By the time his ministry started, he wasn't just gifted, he was grounded. That's what silence does. It grounds you before it launches you. And let's be real, if God answered every prayer instantly, you'd never learn to endure. You'd never develop patience. You'd never build the kind of trust that lasts when storms hit. Quick answers satisfy for a moment, but they don't sustain for a lifetime. Silence teaches you to live off promises, not proof. Off faith, not feelings. Off trust, not timelines. So stop seeing the silence as a setback. Start seeing it as strategy. God quiet not because he's absent, but because he's making you strong enough to hold what's coming. And when the answer finally breaks through, you're going to carry it different. You're going to value it more. You're going to steward it better. Silence is not your enemy. It's your training ground. Let's talk about Job, the brother who lost it all in one sweep. His children gone. His wealth stripped. His health broken. Sitting in ashes, covered in sores, surrounded by so-called friends who thought they had answers. And through it all, Job kept crying out to God. Page after page, chapter after chapter, his prayers sound like one long voicemail. God, where you at? Why you let this happen? Why you so quiet when I need you the most? And what did he hear back? Silence. For 30-some chapters, God said nothing, not a word. Job begged for clarity. He pleaded for answers. He demanded explanations. But heaven stayed still. And if you ever felt like your prayers bounced back empty, that's the same pain Job lived. But here's the twist. God's silence didn't mean abandonment. He was listening the whole time. He was present the whole time. And when he finally broke the silence, he didn't show up small. He showed up in a whirlwind. Power, presence, majesty. God reminded Job that even in the silence, creation still spoke, the universe still testified, the world still ran under his hand. which meant Job was never alone. Job's story proves this. Silence don't mean God stepped out. Silence don't mean you failed. Silence is often the space where your faith gets purified, where you stop worshiping answers and start worshiping God Himself. Job didn't get all his questions answered, but he got God, and that was enough to carry him. By the end, everything Job lost got restored double. But the real treasure wasn't the stuff, it was the trust forged in silence. So if Job can sit in ashes, cry out unanswered, and still hold on till God spoke, you can too. His silence ain't a period, it's a pause. And like Job, when he breaks it, you gonna see that he was present all along, listening to every word you thought was wasted. So what do we do with this, fam? Because it's one thing to hear about Job sitting in ashes, one thing to nod while I say silence don't equal absence, but it hit different when you the one praying and the line feel dead. That's why I want to hand you something simple, something practical, something you can practice tonight when the room gets heavy. First move, journal the silence. Don't just let the quiet sit in your chest till it turned toxic. Grab a notebook, your phone, a piece of paper, anything. Write your prayers like Job did. Write your questions. Write your frustration and don't censor it. Don't edit it to sound holy. Just be raw, because what you write down becomes witness that you did speak, that your voice did rise, and it will remind you later that God always shows up even if his response ain't immediate. Second move, set a silence appointment. If God ain't talking, don't just fill the gap with endless noise. Give him space to speak how he wants. 10 minutes, no music, no screens, just you sitting, breathing, whispering, Lord, I'm here. It might feel awkward at first, but trust me, silence has a way of uncovering whispers you missed. Sometimes his answer ain't words, it's peace. And peace only shows up when you make room for it. Third move, anchor in what he already said. When the present feels quiet, pull on the past word. Open your Bible, highlight promises, and speak them out loud over yourself. Say, he promised never to leave me. He promised to work all things for good. He promised new mercies every morning. When heaven feels silent, let Scripture speak. That way, the silence don't stay empty. It stays filled with truth. Fam, you don't got to be crushed by the quiet. You can turn silence into sanctuary. You can turn unanswered prayers into written testimonies in progress. You can turn a heavy room into holy space just by showing up different. Tonight, don't just sit in the night watch, practice it. And when you do, the silence that used to drain you will start to shape you. Here's the next move, fam. Shift your posture in the silence. Too often we meet the quiet with frustration, pacing the floor, scrolling the phone, sighing heavy like the stillness itself is punishment. But what if, instead of resisting the silence, you leaned into it? What if you turned the same hour that feels empty into an altar? Here's how. Pick a posture of prayer that slows you down. Maybe kneeling by the bed, maybe laying flat on the floor, maybe sitting still with open hands. Your body preaches, fam, and when your body says, I surrender, your spirit starts following. Even when words won't come, your posture can speak. And in that space, silence shifts from enemy to invitation. Second part, sing into the quiet. Not performing, not recording, just humming a hymn, a worship song, even a made-up melody. Psalm 22 says, God inhabits the praises of his people, which means silence don't stay silent when you fill it with worship. And sometimes the breakthrough ain't in new instructions. It's in the song you dared to lift when God seemed quiet. Third piece, set a marker in the silence. This could be a candle you light, a sticky note on your wall with the date written on it. Something small that says, tonight I chose trust over panic. Why? Because when the breakthrough comes, and it will come, you gonna look back at that marker and say, that was the night I didn't walk out. Oh, that was the night I stayed. And that memory gonna fuel you the next time the silence shows up. So don't just sit frustrated in the night watch. Shape it, mark it, sing through it, bow into it. Because once you flip your posture, once you change your approach, silence stops being a void and starts being a vessel. And that vessel, it's carrying strength you're going to need for the next season. One last move for this night watch, fam. Don't do silence alone. The enemy loves isolated saints, loves believers who sit in the dark with no one to call, no one to lean on, no one to remind them what's true when their own mind starts spinning. That's why Ecclesiastes 4 says, two are better than one. If either falls, the other can help them up. And silent seasons are exactly when you need somebody to hold the rope for you. Here's your challenge. Find one trusted person you can text in the quiet. Doesn't gotta be a long speech. Just a midnight message. Pray for me. I'm waiting on God. I don't hear nothing, but I ain't letting go. That one line breaks the lie that you're invisible. It says, I'm still here. I still matter. I still belong. And you'd be surprised how God uses that simple reach to send you encouragement right when you need it. Second part, build a night watch circle. Maybe it's 2 or 3 people who agree when God feels quiet, we gonna stand together. Could be family, could be friends, could be folks in your church group. And when one of you feel like heaven went mute, the others step in with reminders. He's still here. He's still working. Hold on. Silence loses power when you stop facing it solo. Last part, let somebody else's testimony borrow you strength. You might not have your answer yet, but listening to how God showed up for somebody else can carry you through your own pause. Don't let jealousy steal that moment. Flip it. If he did it for them, it's proof he can do it for you. Their breakthrough is a preview, not a threat. And sometimes that's all you need to make it through one more silent night. Fam, don't fight this watch by yourself. So, silence is survivable, but only if you stop letting it isolate you. Reach out, circle up, lean on testimonies, and you'll find that what felt like the loneliest hour becomes the very space where community and faith rise up strongest. Fam, you made it through the night watch. You sat in the silence, wrestled with the questions, felt the weight of heaven's quiet. But hear me, silence don't mean your story stuck. Silence don't mean your faith failed. Silence means God trusts you enough to grow you in the gap. And if you still here, breathing, listening, leaning in, it means the silence didn't break you. It built you. This is your charge. Don't quit in the quiet. Don't walk away just because heaven ain't loud. Every sunrise is proof that silence is temporary. Morning always breaks. And if God was faithful to let the sun rise today, he gonna be faithful to answer in his time. You ain't forgotten. You ain't abandoned. You held in hands that don't drop. Take courage, even in this stillness. Let silence become your training ground. Let waiting become your worship. Let unanswered questions become the altar where you lay down trust. Because the God who felt far is actually closer than your next breath. And when he does speak again, and he will, you gonna realize the silence wasn't wasted. It was working for your good the whole time. So lift your head even at 1 a.m. Wipe those tears even if the room still feels heavy. And declare, I'm still here. I'm still his. I still believe. That declaration alone is victory. And it's the proof hell needed to see. That silence didn't steal your faith. You survived the night watch. And survival at this hour means strength for what's coming. Fam, here's the truth to carry out this hour. God's silence ain't his absence. The night watch feels long, feels lonely, feels like heaven muted your prayers, but it's not a sign he walked away. It's proof he's still holding you steady while he writes the next chapter. Silence is not the end, it's the middle. No. And middles are messy, but they always move toward resolution. So when you lay down tonight, don't replay the quiet like a curse. Reframe it as covenant. Whisper to yourself, he's still here. He's still good. He's still mine. That whisper gonna outlast the doubts. That declaration gonna carry you through the silence until his voice breaks through again. Remember, Jesus himself sat in silence in Gethsemane, crying, sweating drops of blood, asking his Father if there was another way. And heaven stayed still, but the silence wasn't abandonment, it was alignment. And out of that silence came salvation, which means if God trusted silence with his son, he can use silence to shape you too. So as this 1 a.m. watch closes, I charge you, don't curse the quiet, cultivate it. Don't run from the silence, rest in it. Don't see the stillness as punishment, see it as preparation. The same God who held Job in the ashes, who held Jesus in the garden, is holding you now. And when the answer comes, and it will come, you're going to see the silence was never wasted. This is your benediction for the night. The silence won't break you. The silence won't define you. The silence won't last forever. And in the stillness, God is still God. This ain't your Sunday school. This is YNB Spirituals, book closed. It's 1 a.m. now, the kind of hour where the silence gets heavy. And the streets outside quiet down, the traffic fades, even the neighbors finally stop moving around. And yet, inside your chest, it feels louder than ever. You've been praying. You've been calling. You've been asking God for answers. And all you get back? Silence. This is the night watch. The hour where you feel like heaven put you on hold, where your prayers echo back like unanswered voicemails, where you scroll your own memories asking, did I do something wrong? Did God forget about me? Or worse, did he walk away? You don't want to admit it out loud, but deep down, you feel it, like your faith hit a wall. And this silence, it cuts different. You'd rather God tell you no than say nothing. You'd rather feel his correction than feel his absence. But here you are, sitting in the stillness, wondering if your words ever reached the throne, wondering why the same God who promised, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, now seems mute in your midnight. But fam, don't get it twisted. Silence don't equal absence. Just 'cause he ain't talking don't mean he ain't listening. Just because you can't hear his voice don't mean his hands ain't moving. The night watch ain't punishment, it's invitation. Invitation to learn that God's quiet ain't rejection, it's preparation. Sometimes his silence ain't a wall, it's a classroom. So welcome to the night watch, the hour where the hardest questions rise, but so do the deepest answers. Tonight we gonna sit in the silence and find out what it's really saying. When God feels silent, you ain't the first to wrestle with it. The Bible full of voices crying out in the dark, wondering why heaven's so quiet. Habakkuk 1:2 says, how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? That's a prophet right there, anointed, chosen, called, still asking, Lord, do you even hear me? David echoed the same in Psalm 13:1. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? This ain't soft language. This ain't polished Sunday praise. This is raw journal entry at 1 a.m., heartbreaking, wondering if God's face turned away. Which means you're not less spiritual for feeling the silence. You in good company. Even the ones closest to God felt it. And then there's Job. stripped of everything, family, wealth, health, and still sitting in ashes asking why the God he served so faithfully suddenly went quiet. His friends had words, but God didn't, at least not for a long while. And in that gap, Job learned something we gotta catch. Silence don't mean abandonment. Silence don't erase covenant. Sometimes silence is the soil where trust gets planted. The Bible keeps it real, fam. It don't hide the ache of waiting seasons. It don't sugarcoat the frustration of praying and feeling unheard. And that's why these verses matter. They show us the silence is not a sign you lost faith. It's proof you in the same classroom, prophets, psalmists, and patriarchs all sat in. God may not be speaking on your timeline, but he's still the teacher. And every teacher stays quiet while the test is in session. So tonight, as we walk through this night watch, keep these scriptures close. Habakkuk's cry, David's lament, Job's patience. Their questions sound like yours, but their faith grew in the silence. And that's where God gonna grow yours too. Ever left a voicemail and nobody called back? You pour your heart out, hitting every detail, hoping they respond quick. You keep checking your phone, waiting for that buzz, that ding, that call back. Hours pass, days pass, nothing. And after a while, it ain't just disappointment. It feels like disrespect. Like, yo, did you even hear me? That's how prayer can feel sometimes. Like you left heaven a voicemail and God ain't bothering to return it. You kneeling on the floor, whispering through tears, begging for answers, and all you get back is silence. No sign, no dream, no random confirmation, just quiet. And the quiet start feeling heavy, like rejection, like maybe your words don't carry weight in heaven. But let's be real, you never stopped calling. You left another message, another prayer, another cry. You double texted God like he left you on red. And that silence starts speaking louder than any word could. It tell you lies like, see, he don't care. He too busy. You not worth responding to. And if you let it, that silence becomes a sermon, but not the kind God preaches. It's the sermon of doubt, the sermon of insecurity, the sermon of fear. But pause for a second. Sometimes people don't call back right away because they setting things up. They not ignoring you. They working behind the scenes. And if that's true with people, how much more with God? Just cause you ain't hear nothing don't mean nothing ain't happening. Silence don't equal stillness. Heaven's voicemail ain't broke. Sometimes the response just ain't ready yet. So maybe the unanswered prayer ain't proof God forgot. Maybe it's proof God's still building the answer. And until it's time, the silence gonna train you, not to stop praying, but to trust deeper, to believe that even when the line feels dead, the connection's still alive. You left your message and trust me, he heard it. Heaven always checks the inbox. You ever text somebody and all you see is the little gray bubbles pop up? They typing, then the bubbles disappear, typing again, then nothing, no message, no reply, just silence, and your mind goes wild. What they about to say? Did they change their mind? Did I say something wrong? That weight feels heavier than a straight up yes or no. That's how God's silence feels sometimes. Like you see signs he's moving. A door cracking open here, a conversation there, a random confirmation on a billboard. But then it all fades. The bubble disappears. And you sitting there wondering, Lord, you still typing? Or did you stop responding altogether? That space between promise and performance, that's the tension of the night watch. And here's the thing, we hate that space. We want clarity. We want the text to drop so we know what's next. But God's silence don't mean he ghosted you. Sometimes he's still writing the response. Sometimes he's editing the words, setting the stage, making sure the timing perfect. And what looks like delay to you is designed to him. Think about Joseph in prison. God gave him dreams, visions of rulership, but then years of silence. No updates, no angelic notifications, just bars, shadows, and waiting. But was God absent? No. God was typing, setting up the famine, the Pharaoh, the palace. The answer wasn't late. It was layered. And maybe that's your story right now. The bubbles of God's promise showed up. You know he heard you, but the message ain't dropped yet. And the silence is driving you crazy. But fam, silence don't mean shutdown. Silence means setup. And if you can wait without deleting the thread, you're going to see the message drop right on time. Ever been stuck in a waiting room, doctor's office, DMV, airport gate delay? You sitting there with your number, your ticket, your appointment time, but they ain't calling you. Folks who came in after you already walked out with answers. And you still sitting there wondering if they forgot your name. That wait gotta wait. And it make you question whether the system even working. That's how God's silence feels. Like you in heaven's waiting room. You checked in with prayer. You filled out the form with tears. You sitting with your number in your hand, expecting it to be called any minute. But one by one, other folks around you get testimonies. They stand up and say, God healed me. God blessed me. God answered my prayer. And you clap for them, but deep down you think, Lord, did you skip me? Did my file fall off the desk? Did heaven lose my paperwork? And the longer you wait, the louder the silence gets. The chair feels harder, the clock ticks slower, and you start fighting the temptation to walk out, to say, forget it. If God not calling my name, I'll figure it out myself. But fam, walking out the waiting room don't get you answers. It just gets you lost. And sometimes the silence is not neglect, it's scheduling. God ain't forgot your number. He just lining things up so when he calls you, everything on the other side is ready. Remember Sarah and Abraham? God promised them a child, but years passed with no sound, no sign. Silence stretched so long, they tried to handle it themselves. And the weight of that detour still echoed through history, which means silence is dangerous, not because God ain't moving, but because we rush to move without him. So hear me, the waiting room of heaven is real. And yeah, it's frustrating, but if you hold your seat, if you keep your ticket, if you resist the urge to storm out, you gon' find out the silence was not empty. It was the hallway to the exact door you've been praying to walk through. Your number's still in his hand. And when it's called, you gon' know why the wait was worth it. Here's the hard truth, fam. Silence hurts. It don't just confuse you, it wounds you. 'Cause when people stay quiet, we assume they don't care. When a friend don't text back, we feel forgotten. When a parent don't answer, we feel abandoned. So when God stays silent, our hearts translate it the same way. If he loved me, he'd say something. If he cared, he'd show up. That's the math our feelings do in the dark, and that math, it multiplies lies. Silence becomes shame. Shame whispers, maybe you ain't holy enough. Fear whispers, maybe you messed up too bad. Doubt whispers, maybe he was never there in the first place. And if you don't catch it, those whispers start sounding louder than God's last word over your life. You start building your identity on his quiet instead of his promises. This is why silence cuts so deep. It's not just about waiting on answers. It's about what the wait tells you about yourself. And the enemy knows it. He slides into the stillness with counterfeit sermons. See? He ain't real. If he was, he'd speak. If he was, you wouldn't be stuck. And before you know it, you start doubting not just the promise, but the promiser. But let me say this plain. God's silence is not rejection. Silence ain't him ghosting you. Silence ain't him packing up and walking out your life. Sometimes silence is strategy. But because we ain't used to it, we misinterpret it. We think he quiet 'cause he mad, or he quiet 'cause he absent, when really he quiet 'cause he building. Think about it like this. When the teacher hand out a test, the classroom gets silent. Not 'cause the teacher left, not 'cause the teacher don't care, but because it's time for the student to apply what they already learned. And if the teacher kept talking, the test wouldn't prove nothing. Same with God. Sometimes his silence is not punishment. It's proof he trusts you with the material. And that's what makes the night watch so hard, 'cause your feelings scream forgotten. But faith got to whisper back, I'm not alone. I'm just being tested. And the teacher's still in the room. You ever notice how unanswered prayers start to echo louder than answered ones? You could have 10 testimonies in your pocket, 10 times God came through, 10 miracles that prove his hand is real, but let one prayer hang in the silence too long, and it drowns out all the rest. That's the trick of the midnight hour. It magnifies the one place God feels quiet and makes you forget everywhere he's been loud. And it ain't just about the wait. It's about what the wait whispers. You keep asking, Lord, why not me? Why not now? You scroll your feed and see somebody else getting the breakthrough you begged for. You hear somebody testify in church about the exact miracle you still waiting on. And instead of celebrating, jealousy sneak in, bitterness sneak in. You clap with your hands but cry in your chest. And in that space, silence feels like salt in the wound. Then your mind start building narratives. Maybe God picked favorites. Maybe he blessing them 'cause they holier. Maybe I did something wrong and disqualified myself. And before long, you not just doubting his timing, you doubting his character. That's what silence does if you let it linger unchecked. It don't just delay your hope, it distorts your picture of God. And fam, that distortion is deadly. 'Cause once you believe God don't care, you stop praying. Once you believe he turned his back, you stop hoping. And once you stop hoping, you start looking for substitutes. You start leaning on relationships, substances, distractions, anything to fill the gap of the God you think went quiet. That's how silence becomes sabotage. Not because God left, but because you let the enemy narrate the quiet. So let's call it what it is. Unanswered prayers don't mean unanswered lives. Silence don't mean neglect. Delay don't mean denial. But if you don't guard your mind in the waiting, silence will rewrite your faith into fear. And that's why the night watch dangerous. It's the breeding ground of lies. But it can also be the training ground of trust. About the difference, who you let define the silence. Let's be real, fam. Silence don't just frustrate, it isolates. You start feeling like the kid left on the curb after school, waiting on a ride that never came. Like everybody else got picked up, carried home, covered, but you You stuck on the curb with your backpack of prayers, wondering if you've been forgotten. That sense of invisibility, that's the part that breaks you in the night watch, 'cause humans crave acknowledgement. We need to know somebody see us, hear us, recognize our pain. And when the heavens stay quiet, it feel like you invisible even to God, like your cries bounced off the ceiling, like your tears slid down your cheek but never made it to his book. And in that gap, your heart starts whispering, maybe I don't matter. Maybe my voice too small. Maybe God got bigger things to worry about. But here's the deception. Silence makes you confuse stillness with absence. Just because he ain't talking don't mean he ain't listening. Just because you can't trace his voice don't mean you can't trust his heart. And yet in the moment, your emotions scream louder than truth, and loneliness grows like weeds in the soil of quiet. And if you don't uproot it, it chokes your faith. This is why so many believers walk away in seasons of silence. They mistake the pause for punishment. They confuse God's timing with God's character. And they let unanswered prayers convince them they unworthy of answers. That's the danger of the 1 a.m. watch. It weaponizes your own insecurities against you. The devil don't even need to talk much. He just lets the silence do the work. But here's what you gotta catch. Invisibility to people don't equal invisibility to God. Silence don't erase the fact that your name's still carved in his hands. You are seen even when you don't feel heard. And the only way you survive the night watch is by anchoring your soul to that truth. 'Cause if you let your feelings run the show, silence gon' feel like abandonment. But if you anchor in the word, silence gon' become assurance that God's still holding you, even if he whispering in ways you can't detect yet. And here's the rawest part, fam. Silence don't just make you feel invisible. It make you question your own voice. You start asking, am I praying wrong? Are my words too weak? Do I even know how to talk to God? Every unanswered moment feels like evidence that maybe your faith don't measure up. And that kind of doubt, it cuts deep. Think about it. You pour your heart out, tears staining the pillow, breath catching between sentences, and the room just sits there quiet. No dream, no sign, no whisper, just stillness. And in that stillness, shame tries to settle in. You start thinking, maybe I ain't worthy. Maybe my sin too heavy. Maybe I don't qualify for God's attention. And once shame moves in, silence ain't just quiet, it's accusatory. That's how dangerous the night watch can be. Silence turns into a courtroom in your head. Every past failure steps up to testify against you. Every mistake shouts, this why he not talking to you. And if you let it, you'll believe the lie that God's quiet is punishment, when really it's just pause. You'll think the judge walked out, when really he's still sitting at the bench. He just ain't banged the gavel yet. And let me be honest, it's easier to handle a no than to handle nothing. At least no gives you closure. But silence makes you wrestle. And that wrestling either weakens you or it strengthens you. It either drives you away or it drives you deeper. And the outcome depends on whether you let the silence be a wall or a well. So hear me, God's silence is not rejection, it's refinement. It don't mean your prayer's broken. It means your faith being stretched. It don't mean you disqualified. It means you being discipled. But if you misread it, you'll spend the whole night watch dragging yourself through shame that was never yours to carry. And tonight, we gonna flip that script. We gonna turn the silence from a sentence into a setup, from an accusation into an invitation, from a weight into a witness. Here's the pivot, fam. Silence ain't punishment, it's preparation. You've been hearing the quiet is rejection, but what if the quiet is actually rehearsal? What if God's silence is the stage being set? See, sometimes the teachers stay quiet while the test is in progress. Not because he left the room, but because he already gave you what you need to pass. And if he kept talking, you'd lean on his voice instead of flexing your faith. Think about it. When a seed gets planted, it don't sprout in noise. It don't break through under bright lights and applause. It grows in dirt, in silence, hidden, unseen. And just because you can't see movement don't mean it ain't happening. Roots forming in the dark is proof life is working even when nothing looks alive. That's what silence is. It's soil. And soil seasons feel suffocating until you realize they're strengthening you underground. This is the turning point. You get to decide what silence means. Will you let it be a wall that blocks you or a well that deepens you? Will you see it as God ignoring you or God inviting you to trust without a sign? Silence don't mean he absent. It means he trusts you enough to sit with the quiet. That's maturity. That's growth. That's faith on a different frequency. So, the night watch is not God ghosting you. It's God grooming you. Not him forgetting your name, but him firming your foundation. And the moment you flip that lens, the silence stops feeling like abandonment and starts looking like training. And that shift right there, that's where the breakthrough begins. Fam, silence don't mean absence, it means instruction. The quiet is a classroom. And sometimes the deepest lessons ain't shouted,